Good morning. How's everybody doing? Hopefully you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. Morning.
Tommy.
What up, Tommy?
Good to see you.
Finally could make another Zoom call.
It's been like a year.
I know.
like.
I had a work meeting scheduled this time every Friday, and I'm like, I'm skipping that. I got better things to do.
Well, thanks. We appreciate everybody who gets up early with us on a Friday morning.
We appreciate everyone that listens later because, sometimes you just can't cancel that meeting, and that's cool too. Or you can't not drop your kids off at school. Sometimes stuff just has to get done.
Yep, that's so true. Oh my goodness. Well, the dog is already bothering me. Yeah, her normal. Well, cool. We're excited to talk about some winter training, off-season-ish topics today. I think for everybody, especially for athletes who haven't been training for that long with a coach, it can be, a little strange, the concept of running through winter, right? Because winter doesn't always feel like the season for running. It often feels, especially for people who kind of live up in the mountains, it feels like more of a winter sports kind of time of year. And there are a number of reasons why we want to run in winter, why it's good for athletes of all levels to run in winter. We've got some tips for winter running and all of that. Some of this stuff, maybe for some people is a bit review, but I think, really helpful to maybe dive into this at this point of the year. We're still kind of waiting on winter to appear here, as it was 60 degrees yesterday.
It's been sports bra weather all
afternoon.
Week. Actually, it's been weather where like I leave the house in a long sleeve, like a responsible adult. And by the time I get back, I'm like, I have gloves shoved in my sports bra and like my shirt is shoved into my shorts and I'm really dehydrated.
Those sneaky dehydration situations happening on my runs. Oh my,
I won't realize until I'm like sitting at my computer. I'm like, why do I feel awful? That I'm like, oh, I haven't had any water today.
Well, cool. Yeah, we've got some questions that you guys have actually sent in regarding winter and off season and all of that. So maybe we'll kind of start with some of those just to kind of get the conversation going, and then as we usually do, go off on wild tangents. Cool. So this is kind of the first one here. How can I balance winter activities while also keeping consistent in my running training? Is that a cough or a laugh?
It was a cough.
Cough/laugh.
Claff.
A
laugh.
Yeah, cool. Well, this question is about the balance between, seasonally appropriate sports activities and also staying consistent. And maybe we could preface this with the fact that why do we want to run in winter? I think there's a number of reasons for that, and there's a number of different kind of protocols that we use for athletes depending on how much experience they have. That way they can utilize the winter training months, in the most appropriate way. And the reasoning behind why we want to run in winter is consistency. Consistency is the most important thing in running, and in also, I'm sure you guys are noticing consistency is important in other aspects of life as well. But with running, that frequency of movement, very, very important for developing the neural pathways that lead to more efficient running over time. So if we let that all go by the wayside in winter, we end up in spring when it's a bit warmer, having to almost start from the very beginning with the running process. Maybe Kylie or Zoe, do you guys want to kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say, for some folks, like, I don't know, we have a lot of folks in the Southeast and they're like, finally I can train and it's not 90 degrees. So like, this is like that's their like, it just kind of depends on where you are. But for a lot of folks, like I'm looking at Tommy up in Wisconsin. You know, a lot of folks like winter is like not always that pleasant. Or like in Colorado, there's the distraction of skiing and other winter sports. I think, you know, it's all about like finding that balance between doing what you need to do to continue to progress in your running without burning out. So for some folks, it might be subbing in a ski day instead of a Sunday run. But for a lot of us, it's going to mean, you know, still getting out on our long runs on Saturday, strapping on the headlamp for, you know, the workout, doing what you need to do to prioritize that long-term consistency and not necessarily letting winter be an excuse, but trying to adapt.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of athletes make who are self-coached or maybe who are working with the coach, but maybe not communicating a little bit about that winter kind of sport desire is they tend to run a little less frequently, which puts a lot of pressure on the days where they do run. And so those days become a little more stressful for the body. And often those athletes tend to be newer to the sport and they're not really ready. They don't have the background, the musculoskeletal adaptations and things to have, you know, 2 or 3 like quote unquote long runs in a week because they're trying to fit all of that same volume into less days. And that becomes really, really risky. So again, like kind of like what Zoe meant, what she mentioned was that like being consistent and then, you know, kind of when it's appropriate, maybe when conditions are great on the mountains, when you've got a family trip, whatever, there's tons of different reasons we see popping up with our athletes, but like subbing in some of those ski days on the weekend or during the week, but kind of like grounding the training in the running frequency and that consistency. Yeah, Kylie, I'm curious if there's, you know, maybe a way that you frame that with your athletes who are new with you, or if you're kind of like working with the new athlete, they're signing up in winter and they're like, I want to run 3 days in winter and ski 2 days. What do you tell them when you're like about consistency and the importance of running through winter?
Well, I think that you guys kind of touched on it, but if we're looking at the injury risk, if you were to take like most of your winter and not really run at all and not run consistently, and then you start training you think you're going to be ready maybe for like a 50 or 100 miler, and you start ramping up that volume a little bit, that injury risk just goes up significantly because your body's not used to the pounding stress. And so I think, you know, I've had some athletes that want to incorporate some winter sports, which is great, but I kind of have like a minimum amount of training that I think they should be doing, like number of days per week that they should be doing. And sometimes even just like, I'll say like we could do like a shorter run, but also you can then maybe do a ski or something, you know, if it's not, you know, hindering maybe a long run day or something like that. So kind of looking at it from that perspective and like working with that athlete, but also like in my mind from that coach's perspective, I don't think it's appropriate to just say like, oh, I'm going to take the whole winter off and not run it on, then run 100 miler in June or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the mention of like those goals really is something that kind of guides the training over winter for many, many athletes. Particularly important if you don't feel like you're ready to commit to running 5 days a week in winter, you know, perhaps you have to have a conversation about when that, you know, that 50K plus, I mean, I'd say for a lot of people, 50K and up, when that race is going to actually happen for you, what a realistic timeline is. I know for myself, I tend to try to ski a little bit and to kind of bring this back to like the balancing of winter sports. You know, as Zoe mentioned, it's seasonally appropriate to ski in winter. It's not always, you know, seasonally appropriate in the middle of a snowstorm to get out to get your 40-minute, 50-minute, 60-minute run in, or hour and 90-minute run for some athletes who are more advanced in a snowstorm. And that can be challenging. But, the bottom line is like, you have to think about, okay, some days, yeah, I'm going to skip my run. I'm going to go ski. And that feels good to me. That's refreshing. It's something new that helps to kind of boost me up mentally, especially kind of on those gray days. Those gray days here really kind of affect me and make the training like a little less fun. So, injecting a little bit of winter sports, ski, whatever you like to do, if it's Nordic, uphill, I'm always encouraging my athletes, bring that aerobic kind of, activity into what you're doing. If you want to go skiing, we'll make it an uphill day. Get the benefit of some of that aerobic base building too while you're out there. But the main thing is like communicating that with your coach so they can shuffle the schedule. And the big thing that I like to do with athletes to kind of keep that balance, because again, the importance of like the mental side of things, it can help refresh and lift an athlete up to put a couple ski days into a week of training in the middle of winter. But I like my athletes to hit at least 4 days of running in the winter on those ski weeks and 5 days the other weeks. And so that schedule is always going to be run, normal schedule with maybe an optional couple days for ski. The cross training day, great day for skiing. Sunday after your long run, great day for skiing. And when an athlete, knows that they're going to ski on a Sunday, guess what? Friday can be a short, easy run, 25 to 35 minutes, just for the sake of keeping that consistency, because that consistency really matters, as we touched on in a number of calls. Why we want to run consistently really helps, one, build aerobic capacity, but most importantly, for building those kind of neuro pathways that help us with efficient running over time. And we want that come spring when we've got our first race. We want that, we would want to have had that come summer when our 50 miler is, or whatever we're doing.
And if the weather conditions are ever like make you feel unsafe, obviously find not run. I'll also say that if where you are, the trails are super snowy, great opportunity to not run trail. We really don't want to see people out there like trudging through the snow. We want to avoid plodding. We want to avoid, that like those opportunities where your output is like, I don't know, like we want to prioritize running where your economy is being positively reinforced, not just like snowshoeing.
Yeah.
It's like not that productive at all. Like it saps your energy and it makes you actively, like it doesn't help with running at all.
Yeah, we always have those athletes. And I think sometimes if the trails are really packed down, and we'll use this as an opportunity, maybe to segue into some more specific talk just about winter training in general. But I think a packed out trail, sure, that can be fun because it's more like running on a firm surface.
Yeah.
But running through powder, untracked powder, post-holing,
not a great fitness activity. Like you are literally going to become a better runner sitting on the couch than you are post-holing.
Yeah. So yeah, here's a question. I'll pose this to you guys, to Zoe and Kylie, and would love to hear from the athletes too about little things that work for you guys during the winter as well. Please use the chat box, or feel free to just jump right in. But what should training look like for an athlete that has never run in the winter season before? I think this is, the author of this question really mentions that before they were in a very winterous area, maybe say Pacific Northwest or something where it's like raining and snowing like most days of the winter. And now they're living in like a climate where it's a lot easier to get out and run, maybe more like Carbondale, where there's only, there's fewer days where we're impacted by like snowstorms. How should that
I'll also
athlete
say
adjust?
like we train athletes that live in like Canada and Alaska. So unless you're one of those few athletes, good luck convincing your coaches you weren't able to get the run in because it was too cold or whatever. Like obviously, like if it's unsafe, if it's genuinely too cold, great. But like, I don't know, we've had people from like the South be like, well, it was 40 degrees. So obviously I couldn't run. Not going to fly with your coaches. We live in Colorado. Good luck with that excuse. jogging pants are great. I would say like, I mean, mostly congratulations. Like after you do your first year of like solid year-round training, like that is when you're going to start to see the most growth and improvement in your running. I would say like really the big things that, I mean, just change for me seasonally are that I'm not doing as many runs on trails. So I'm prioritizing speed and economy a bit more in the winter months. And then like if you are an athlete that does doubles, again, like if it's not that great to be outside, you can incorporate more cross training doubles depending on the level of athlete and what your goals are, or, just spend a little less time outside, do lower volume, higher intensity training, more focused on top end speed and economy development. But I think, again, the big things are just going to be focusing on staying consistent and then not being frustrated. Like there are, a couple months out of the year where like even our bike paths are a little bit snowy, they're a little bit icy. It's maybe not going to be, the fastest speed workouts we ever do. The long runs might be, maybe not as enjoyable, but the important thing is getting out there and not judging yourself if you have a day that is a little bit slower because there is, a little bit of ice on the sidewalk or something.
Yeah. That's awesome, Zoe. And I think that we've talked a time or two about how amazing it is to focus on speed and economy development and what that means. When we're thinking about top end work, we're going to be reducing volume in order to balance the training stresses there. But I think on the other side of this is a big opportunity for newer athletes. And I'm thinking athletes who, have less than 3 years of running experience. When you get into that like 2 to 3 year, depending, I think closer to 2 years for male athletes and probably 3 years for female athletes, we can really start to use the winter for speed development. However, for newer athletes, that's actually fairly risky because the foundation for higher intensity training isn't there. And so winter becomes a great opportunity for building aerobic base. And I'm kind of thinking about that build that you put on Trail Runner's website recently, Zoe, and stuff like that. Very effective for newer athletes where we're doing these longer cycles, maybe 8 to 12 weeks, where we're really working on easy running. We're getting out there, we're oscillating the training volume where we're kind of maybe ascending 2 or 3 weeks in a row, followed by like a pretty significant down week for adaptation. And just kind of continuing that cycle with some smaller doses of speed built in, not these bigger workouts that other more advanced athletes might be seeing, but a lot of strides, a lot of hills to continue to emphasize the top end work, but to keep that appropriate for the where that athlete's actually at in the process. And I think that is a huge advantage because take an athlete who's only been running for a couple of seasons, 1, 2, or 3 years, it really isn't a lot of time, especially when we're really thinking about things in like that 3 to 5 to 10 year span for like really looking at potential.
Kylie had an awesome Instagram post this week that was like, how long have you been running, Kylie? Like 25 years or something?
Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah. So like you started running when I was 3 years old.
I am older than you, Zoe.
Yeah. It's awesome.
That really puts it into perspective for me.
Yeah, that's the kind of like, I can't wait till I've been running for 25 years. I wish I had started when I was 3. It's my only regret.
You were running at 3.
I was definitely running at 3. It's probably when I peaked.
Might have been peak speed.
Peak speed. No endurance.
No, none. It's awesome. Yeah. So, Kylie, I don't know if you want to jump in, but what your kind of thoughts are on that. I know that I saw your head nod and that you've also got a ton of experience working with athletes in the winter.
And training in a mountain town.
And you're also training. You're out there every day with Loti.
Well, the question, I think, if I'm reading it right, asked about someone that was worried about year-round training and possibly like taking maybe a break or something is like the way I read it. Like sometimes with athletes that maybe aren't used to training year-round, like I might give them like 2 weeks or something of like their choice, or like a downtime around the holidays or something. And so I think like talking with your coach about what might be appropriate in those situations could be nice too. And I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that, but that's kind of how I approach it sometimes.
Might be a good time to segue to the off season.
Yeah, I think we kind of hit, just to summarize that question about like what kind of training we're prioritizing in winter for more advanced athletes. We're thinking 2 or at least 2, probably closer to 3 or more years of running experience. That's going to be an opportunity for speed development. For athletes who are newer, that's going to be an opportunity for building aerobic base. Both great opportunities. If you're a more advanced athlete, you also might be building some aerobic base too. You might just not realize it. So the question about off season is always one that I think every coach deals with an email, like daily emails on this one, this time of year. So it's just such an important topic. So this one came in a little bit before, well, we've been compiling these winter questions for a while. So it's kind of winter. Maybe it's not, we're not sure. It's confusing in Carbondale.
I'm fine with like sports weather all year round.
Yeah, but this is kind of like a 2-parter, but it's winter is right around the corner and I'm finding it hard to motivate myself for winter runs. Usually I take the entire season off. Are there any benefits to taking an off season? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, I have a difficulty with the term off season because I think people think it's an entire season off, and it's not. If you take a season off, you are not going to see the same. I mean, not only are you going to, don't take a season off. Like very few serious athletes take an entire season off, but many do, yes, take like a couple or a few weeks of a reduced volume. You can even take as much as 80% off and still maintain a certain level of fitness, but we're not no one who really is pursuing running in a serious way takes a whole season off.
And by serious way, are you thinking,
I'm
pretty
thinking
much
of
everybody
anyone who
who's
wants to
on our
progress.
team
Yeah.
is a pretty serious athlete. You've got a coach, you're looking to improve.
Sorry.
That's okay. You're looking to improve, you're a serious athlete. So like that downtime, can actually have impacts. Yeah, I don't want to be the only one to talk about this. So yeah, maybe Kylie, or do you want to kind of continue? I kind of interrupted you.
Yeah, I just think that I just want to define term that when we say off season, we don't literally mean like a whole season.
Right.
Yeah.
And the author of this question did mention that they were used to taking winter completely off.
Yeah. I totally I am a Southerner, dude. Like I do not love snow. I don't like cold. I am that person who's like 40 degrees. What is it? Christmas Day? That's not, I really don't. It's not my jam. But I think, I learned a hard lesson when I moved to Aspen for a season, in that you just have to adapt. You have to just be okay with doing some runs in the dark, doing some runs on the treadmill, doing some runs in the snow, and always being okay with reduce, make the run shorter if the conditions aren't that great. Find a friend to run with if you don't feel comfortable running in the dark alone. Plan a route that has more light and is better lit and is maybe just easier to navigate in the dark. But you just have to do some things that are maybe suboptimal or less fun in the winter. And that's just kind of part of it, but you can make it more fun. Also, again, use it as an opportunity to run with friends. Use it as an opportunity to explore new routes. Use an opportunity to run the same route. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, great answer. Yeah, I think to be clear, I never recommend more than 2 weeks off of running. Once we pass 10 days of being inactive,
you're going to see some serious detraining.
You are going to see detraining happen. I think that even if you're kind of experiencing that kind of mental seasonal blues. Once 10 days is up, you've got to really start to just push yourself to make a change. Unfortunately, sometimes we can't wait for the feeling to hit you before you go out and run. You have to go out and find the feelings yourself. And that for some people is a challenging concept, that we can run to create that kind of like mood or that feeling that you're looking for, that positivity. We don't have to wait for the motivation to get out there, because you will experience detraining. I think specifically the kind of things that we see when athletes take a significant time off, it's increased soreness on runs of the same length that they used to be able to complete all the time. Their quads get sore fairly quickly. They're more tired. Also a loss of efficiency.
Oh man, the neuromuscular.
That happens really quickly.
After I took like a full week off after my 100, the first run back, my legs were like, whoa, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Which like, again, like that's a good, like obviously you shouldn't be like, well, I'm just going to run so I can maintain that neuromuscular bit. Like time off is good. Time off is important, but that's why we really try to balance things with an off season. And I just think like sometimes like you see a lot of people on social media talking about an off season, and it's kind of like, well, what does that mean for you? Because for our team, it means, I would say some time at reduced volume, really rarely full time off. And I think if you feel that you need to take significant time away from running, what that says to me as a coach is that we're doing too much in our regular season. Like if you feel that you need to take like a big step back or a big step away, it means that we're probably overreaching in some other key areas, and we would actually benefit from bringing our averages a little bit down so that you don't feel like you have to like do these like, oh, well, I hit these huge peak weeks and like I was really focused on this race goal and I was so focused and so committed that now I just need like 2 months to like not think about running. Like to me, that says like, yeah, you did too much. You did a goal that was not suitable for you.
Great point, Zoe. I think that that's something that I probably would have overlooked in this conversation, but something that we constantly see as coaches is that kind of like burnout effect after a big season of over racing. And that's really where it's important to, again, let's all take time to process kind of our thinking behind these things and try to come to the root cause of why, you might be feeling a certain way. It's very important to adopt a learner's mindset as an athlete so you can continue to make better decisions about your goal selection, better decisions about your training. You guys are the drivers of this process. It's not always up to your coach to be able to interpret these signals for you. You as the athlete are responsible for a lot of these things. And so, when you're feeling burned out at the end of the season, just like Zoe says, it's like, well, we need to look back at your season. Were you overreaching? Are you running 200s in the span of 6 months or attempting to? Are you running multiple races over 50K? And this is something that I love to talk to my athletes about going into a new season. We're weeks away from 2022. I'm getting all of these emails about race goals. Love it. You guys are awesome. Lot of big dreams out there, but there's many seasons of running to be had for athletes who play the long game. There are few seasons to be had for athletes who feel like this is the only season of running. It's 2022 or bust. That's the wrong approach, because you end up at the end of the year exhausted. Maybe you've got some symptoms of overtraining or burnout, all of these things that we've seen.
I think it's like also just particularly important to pay attention mentally how you're feeling, because for a lot of folks, like, because we do tend to emphasize lower volume training as opposed to like huge weeks, mentally, like most of our athletes are going to have those mental and emotional symptoms before they have the like actual like physiological symptoms of overtraining, right? But if you are feeling like, man, at the end of this season, I didn't like running, I'm kind of burnt out, all I can think about is like sitting on my couch and skiing, that to me is like a really important sign to pay attention to, that like we need to approach next season differently. We need to reassess what we're doing day in and day out to make sure we never get to that place where you're like, screw running, I just want to watch Big Mouth for 2 days straight.
Right. And then with those athletes, the emphasis on taking a week off, awesome, love that. And then after that, it's really trying to get to a place where you can build that athlete back up to about 50% of their normal volume. And that's kind of the magic zone where we're not gonna probably experience a lot of performance gains, especially if that athlete's not doing speed during that time, but we're gonna actually be maintaining some adaptations. So there won't be as much performance loss. It's when we dip below 50% of regular, of a kind of that normal average volume that we really see athletes start to detrain. And then a lot of work has to be done later on when that athlete's feeling better, and we can avoid those things. Yeah, Kylie, I'm curious with athletes you coach, there's kind of the motivation piece to this question. Winter's tough. Zoe talked a little bit about this, but Zoe is a strong self-motivator. But for other athletes who are, struggling a little bit with that motivation, do you have any tips for getting out there on that cold morning or that snowy run? How do you encourage your athletes?
So it's kind of, I use this approach with the nutrition as well, is thinking about what is your roadmap and what is your reason for wanting to do this, and remembering your why behind wanting to do it throughout the process, and actually writing those things out as a visual for yourself, as a reminder. And then the other thing is making it that priority in regards to making it easier for yourself so that you don't make excuses. So set out your shoes or your clothes so that they're ready. Or if you really are, like you were saying, if you're really feeling that burnout or something, then you need to talk to your coach. But if it's really just that lack of motivation, then you've got to revisit, why you're doing this, what the end goals are, what the long-term goals are, etc. And then, I like to make sure that my athletes are still incorporating fun other activities besides running that they enjoy. And so again, like you were saying, with the skiing, or with, I don't know, some of my athletes ride horses, etc., making sure that they have that opportunity to do some of those other things, because I think that for some people contributes, if they feel like they can't do those other things that make them a full person, then they don't really feel motivated to run.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to examine what your input is, right? And be are you potentially overdrawing from a bank that you haven't been making a lot of emotional, mental deposits in? So making sure that you are still taking time to connect with friends and family and to invest in yourself and take care of your mental health, physical health, continue, visiting your PT, talking with your therapist, hanging out with friends, do all that stuff that gives you the energy to keep running. And then I would also say that just don't let motivation factor into what you do. If I didn't work on days where I didn't feel motivated, I wouldn't have a job, right? To be great at anything or half decent at most things, you just can't rely on motivation as the thing that, gets you out of bed. You just have to make that choice regardless of how you feel or how much you want to do things on any given day, because you're committed to being a good writer. And whether or not I feel motivated, I got to work on my book a little bit every day. Whether or not I feel motivated, I'm going to put my shoes on and get out the door. I just don't let motivation factor into it at all.
You're very routine. And also, I'm kind of hearing that you've developed some strong habits, which is, I think, really fundamental. And Kylie, you kind of highlighted this in what you said. It's make it easy for yourself. I put my shoes and my running kit right next to, the door in the morning, and I see it and I just put it on. And once it's on, I know I'm going for my run. And it's the same thing, you come home, you got the foam roller next to the door when you come in, and it's this visual cue. Oh, that's when I need to roll and stretch. 10 minutes, it's all it takes. And that's how you start to develop those habits. And your habits are so strong, Zoe, and we see this with a lot of our really highly motivated athletes as well, is that those habits are so ingrained It's the same thing as when we're developing these neuro pathways to improve in our running. We have neuro pathways that are working for us in our daily life as well. And yours are very well defined. You know exactly what to do. You put the shoes on. You're not waiting for motivation, some kind of emotional feeling or something like that to get you out the door. And often you come back from your runs feeling super like good, I think, as a result of that. And what I'm also hearing is that there's an expectation kind of probably built into this as well for a lot of athletes. Like, you look out the window, it's a gray day, it's 20 degrees, maybe it's snowing, maybe it's raining. That kind of is like, oh, this is going to be a shitty run. Like, look, it's shitty outside. And so our expectation is like, well, I don't want to go out there and feel like shit, so I'm not going to run. I'm just not motivated. And so I think adjusting those expectations can be really key. Like, hey, it's winter, it's going to be cold. That's just how it's going to be. But, you know, I'm looking towards these goals. I'm kind of thinking about some of the tips that Kylie made, where it's like, you know, I need to think about my roadmap towards my goals, what those are. And here's my why behind those goals and why I'm doing this. And like, I've got all these reasons to go out there. And so, you know, I'm making an active choice whether I go out there and try to have some fun or whether I go out there and make it feel like crap and then take that crappy feeling and bring it with me to the next run and the next run and the next run. And that cycle just continues. So we actually are making a very informed choice when we do that. And it doesn't maybe feel like that in the moment, but it really is a choice that you're making. And I think that this is a great argument for why we should all be developing a mindfulness practice alongside of our training as athletes, because the more you become aware that that's a choice, the more you're able to adjust the expectation and then get a benefit from going out the door, rather than saying, you know, this feels like shit, it's shitty outside, I'm not doing it. You know, the more mindful approach is just having more freedom, more options to be like, oh, my goals, that's why I'm doing this. I remember now. Like, or I really enjoy this and I enjoy competing in spring. That's why I'm doing this. And that can kind of change your attitude about getting out there. Kylie, I did have a follow-up question because I thought, you know, your roadmap thing was just so awesome. When you are working with your nutrition clients or with one of your athletes and they're struggling with motivation, you're asking them to kind of revisit their goals. Do you ask them to revisit the why behind their goals or their big why or both? Like what's that process look like?
Well, one thing I wanted to say before I answer that question is I think this is a good reason, you know, why a coach can be helpful, because we can be there as like an accountability tool as well. Obviously, we're not going to force you to go out the door, but being there as that support system, and then like, you know, you have that log to kind of keep yourself accountable and keep yourself going. So anyways, I just wanted to bring that in as well as an important point. And then in regards to the answer to that other question, so whenever I take on a new athlete for nutrition, and this is something I've developed in the last couple of months, I will actually have them write a letter to themselves as to why they are wanting to start this journey, and then what they need motivation wise throughout our time together, because I think that that remembering that throughout the process, because change is hard for a lot of people, and especially with food, because it does involve a lot of emotion. But even like you were saying, like developing this new, if you're a newer athlete, like developing this new skill set of running, and it might not be something that you're used to doing all of the time. And remembering that why and why you want to accomplish something is, I think, really important. And so I will revisit that letter if necessary throughout the process. And then also with my athletes, I always I create a roadmap. So we will kind of revisit those areas on that roadmap if we're kind of losing sight of the goal, at the end goals, etc. I don't know if that answers the question directly, but
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic mechanism.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm already thinking about collaborating with Sarah to make some kind of like roadmap diagram for Instagram on this, because I think that the whole idea is super, super cool. And you really explained it well, actually. That's not a system that I'm actively using, but would really like to start adopting and bringing into my own training, because we really see a lot of athletes, especially around this time of year, like the athlete turnover as a result of lack of motivation, particularly for athletes who have put like a year of training in or gotten to like 9 months, so close to like that year commitment that we ask. And then they, I can't hang on to this for the last couple of months, or, forget about next year. I'm exhausted. It's done. The amount of emails that we've gotten that are just like that, it's insane right now. And I think sometimes it could take maybe just a little bit of coaxing from a coach to get an athlete to like really realize, like, it's actually pretty normal after a big season to feel like this. Here are some of the reasons why you might feel like this. Why don't we take a week off? Then we're going to run at 50% of normal volume. And during that time, think about like this self-motivation letter. What do you need to continue like to work on this process? Like, how are you prioritizing your goals right now? Are you still enjoying this? How does it attach to your original why? Has your why changed? Like, what are your goals for next year? All of these, I think that are really important questions. And this seems like actually a really effective way to, maybe have a discussion about this before. I think a lot of us, when we're challenged by something, and winter is always that time. Winter is the time when Microcosm gets the most signups and the most people quitting. And it's like the funniest thing, because you've got everybody who's like motivated from last season who want to train really well for 2022. And then you've got everybody who probably overreached in 2021 being like, I'm done. So it's just this funny thing. And it's like, almost when you get to that point of being done, do you have this decision to level up on the work that you've done, but to do it wisely and then really see where your potential is, or to walk away from something. So I think that those, at least for me, who as a coach, who I really enjoy the psychological side of being a coach, find that it's super interesting. So this is really cool stuff. I'm not sure. We always go to cool places on these calls. Maybe some more practical things to think about for winter.
Start cold.
Start cold. Keep cold feet.
But don't start with cold feet.
No,
what I mean is like, don't overdress.
Okay, let's get into a little bit. We've got about 15 or so minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about gear. People really want to are loving the gear talk. And maybe kind of like also talk about like some winter running rules 101. Let's start with the rules. We'll finish with the gear. My biggest rule and two biggest rules for winter running: don't run with cold feet. Don't strain in workouts. Reasons for that. One, it's cold. Your feet are fickle. If you're at all like me and you were a skier for a long, long time, maybe your nerve endings in your feet aren't so great. And so you really want to baby your feet as an athlete, especially a runner. As soon as the feet start to feel off, everything else starts to kind of feel off as well. So one of my tips for winter running is warm your shoes up on your radiator over a heater like for 10 minutes before you go out and run. So you're putting your feet into warm shoes. My second tip is, whether you're doing speed work, a long workout, hills, strides, whatever it is, one, make sure you're really warmed up before you get into that workout. So I like to, sometimes cue my athletes in their like 2 to 3 mile warm up before their workout, do a couple, surges, couple 15 seconds on, 60 seconds off, moderately, really easing in. So you're primed to do your 1, 2, 3 minute intervals, whatever your workout is. The second component to that is during that workout, don't be straining for those output levels. Take pace off your watch. Don't use that as a metric to guide your effort. Really try to visualize and feel what like 10K effort feels like, or 5K effort. If you're off, if you're cooking your workout a little bit, or you're a little bit slower, that's okay. We're not worried about exacts. We're really thinking about speed and kind of holding those consistent efforts. The more we start straining for it, the more we see form breakdown, and the more we start to see niggles pop up with athletes in the winter. We really want to be careful about that, because cold muscles are like stiff muscles.
Do a good warm up.
That's your tip?
Do a good warm up.
Yeah. What does like a warm up kind of look like?
I mean, it's going to be different for everyone. I like to do some band work and then leg swings, and some like a lunge matrix, just because like historically the things that give me trouble are my hips and my glutes. So I really try to make sure those things are warmed up. I'll also do some like jacks, like jumping jacks without the arms, to get my ankles. My ankles can sometimes be a little bit crispy in the cold. So like basically pay attention to what things feel like they need a little more TLC before you start running, and then develop a warm-up routine that addresses those things.
Yeah. And I
But
think
like do it inside and like actually get warm. We'll sometimes throw our puffies on to make sure that we're like really nice and warm before we head out.
That's a big thing, because it tends to, in January, we're doing a lot of runs in single digit temps. There's just like no escaping it. And so warming up with the puffy on and almost not going out. I try to like break a sweat before I go out the door.
Yeah, I
find that to
try-
be really helpful for me.
Yeah. I just try to make sure that like I can feel like I like to do like a dynamic lunge so that I can really like activate the chain that I need to feel in my stride.
I think that's a particularly important and a great general recommendation, especially because we see so many lower leg issues with athletes. A lot of that is because we're not getting the top of the posterior chain to work in our running. So, doing all of those warm-ups in a functional way. So it's like trying to stand tall, trying to keep the core activated, really making sure that you're using your glutes. Those things really help to prime the system before you get out and run.
Yeah, like I'll do some dynamic skips, basically like connecting the dots in your brain. So your brain's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna run now.
Awesome. Yeah, I really like that. Kylie, a tip or two?
I'll do the nutrition
Yeah.
side. So winter is not the time to say that you're going to listen to your thirst response, because typically it's decreased. So you need to make sure that you're still hydrating in the winter. And in particular, if you're in a really cold climate, figuring out strategies to carry your hydration so that it doesn't freeze or is more like palatable is advisable. So you can actually like put hot water in your bottles, and you can put your drink mix in there, or your hydration mix in the hot water, and carry it that way, as well as figuring out whether your gear is going to be, or like your bottles, and maybe you have a bladder, is going to be insulated enough. So figuring out maybe like I have athletes using wool socks on their like soft bottles, or the bladder. Some athletes actually create like a pocket or something that like will keep the bladder even closer to their chest to keep them warm and like insulated, as
You can
well
wear
as
it under a shell.
Yeah, under a shell. And then the tube being like insulated as well for that. And then blowing back into the tube if you're running so that the top doesn't freeze. And then that might also, it also warrants, like if you are out on a longer bout of training, you still need to take in calories as well. And the foods that you might use if it's warmer out might not necessarily work if it's cold out, especially with gels. So you do have to be aware that oftentimes a lot of the gels will freeze. And so
Or get real hard to eat.
Yeah, and like the chews are very difficult to eat. So figuring out what you're going to use in those conditions and not just saying like, oh, I'm not going to eat because it's too cold out, So, things might look a little bit different. Maybe you're using something like a baked good or something, because those don't really freeze that easily, like mini muffins or something are nice, or like little soft cookies or something, which might not be your norm, but you might have to adjust a little bit if it's really that cold outside. And then keeping in mind that your like overall daily nutrition too should not really, like in the winter, if you're like not as hungry or more hungry, et cetera, like being aware of like what your body is maybe telling you, and figuring out like, what do I need to do to adjust? Like maybe if you are feeling more hungry, because some of my athletes will say like, oh, in the winter, I just like feel so hungry. And I'm like, really, are you really that hungry? Or is it like you have this idea ingrained in your mind that in the winter you have to eat more? And so for some people that like has carried through their childhood, like their parents were like, oh, it's winter, eat your food or something, and just recognizing those sorts of things that can have an impact on your nutrition, your daily nutrition, and looking at ways to maybe improve upon that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any suggestion, recommendation about mini muffins and cookies is one that I support. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna move towards a muffin-based winter diet.
Abe's muffins.
I love those. They're so good.
They're the best.
Oh, I should mention too, I get the question about like, do I need to have as much hydration? Potentially not quite as much, but the difference isn't like half the amount that you would do in the summer or something. It's typically maybe a couple of ounces. And so playing around with that. So if you're normally a 20 ounce per hour fluid drinker, maybe you're 16 to 18 in the winter. But the way that you're going to be able to gauge whether it's the right amount is typically, are you experiencing still GI distress on your long runs, or is there like sloshing going around in your stomach? Because that can indicate that you're consuming too much per hour. Or do you have to stop and pee every 5 seconds? Which may or may not be related to hydration, but.
Awesome. Yeah, so many good tips there. Just in the last couple of minutes, let's just hit a few gear recommendations. Zoe, what's your take on, jackets, gloves, and Gore-Tex shoes?
Yeah, I think Gore-Tex shoes are a huge waste of money. I think unless you're like, I don't know, live your life. If you are the kind of person who's doing like a bunch of cold ass stream crossings in winter, like great Gore-Tex shoes. In my experience, again, they're just like really not worth the extra money. I don't think you need like an epic winter shoe. I would just invest in a quality sock, like maybe a merino wool sock, a technical fast rating sock. I really like Injinji socks because I get rubbing between my toes, but Dry Max socks are also great. I think that's, instead of spending more money on a shoe that's Gore-Tex, buy a better sock.
What about a Gore-Tex top, like a jacket?
Yeah, I think, again, like I'm kind of split on that. I think like for me, at the temperature, it really depends on your sweat rate and the conditions you're running in. If you're frequently going to be running in like cold, wet, like, I don't know, like 33 degrees and like sleety, like cold rain, like maybe a Gore-Tex jacket might be a good investment. I think it's actually a better investment to have a lighter shell and a better base layer, like a wicking base layer. I like like a wool layer, a closer to the skin, tight fitting layer that's going to help wick sweat away from the body. And then I really like Icebreaker makes fantastic base layers. Oiselle makes fantastic female base layers. Patagonia makes incredible base layers. And then my favorite shell that I've been using for like years now is the Run Rabbit. It's called the Swish Jacket. It's made out of coffee, like recycled coffee grounds somehow, but it's really light. I often find that people tend to actually overdress a little bit. I tend to run warmer as well. But I think just having like some sort of protective layer is really, really great. I also like for really gnarly days, I think if you're willing or interested in dropping serious cash on a jacket, the North Face Future Light flight jackets are the best waterproof layer I've tested for the money.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, great tips. I really don't have any additional tips other than for guys, embrace running tights if it's cold.
I actually like hate tights. Hate them. I wear joggers.
You wear joggers?
Because like I feel like I spend the whole run hiking my tights up, and I just like I hate it. So I'm like fully embracing jogger, like I actually
Wear pants.
Yeah, I love running pants.
Yeah. Cool. Kylie, any tips on your end?
Not really. In addition to what we already kind of talked about,
Cool.
I personally like to have a good pair of like glasses that has like interchangeable lenses in case it's snowing or something.
Yeah.
I do like to rock some shades in the snow. Gotta
Yeah,
watch
but it's
out.
important to get like the
Eyelash ice.
Yeah, like the clear ones, because otherwise you just end up getting, I don't know. For me, like what'll happen is like my bangs will ice over and then they'll drip directly into my eyeballs.
I think we could advocate for a hat or a buff there. I think we've got some
It's a very solvable
microcosm
problem.
ones down in my office. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for joining us. The winter training topic call, so fun. Helps me motivate in winter. Well, thanks. We do not have a call on Monday. We have a coaches meeting, but we will be back next Friday with another call. So looking forward to seeing you guys then. Thank you.
Yay.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Friday.